me see, do I have the notes from last week?
What does the word decadent mean?
It means 10. So what we're looking at with the decanates is each of the 10-degree sections of the zodiac.
Oh, okay.
Most people, what they know about the zodiac is that there are 12 signs. And each sign has 30 degrees.
I was thinking it was more than 10, but I couldn't remember.
So that means if you have 30 degrees, you have 3 decanates in each of the signs of the zodiac.
Okay.
So what we're looking at are 3 subsections to each sign of the zodiac.
Okay.
And that gives us, each of them is associated with a constellation of their own, which goes back as far as the 2nd century AD, and even before that. Some of them go back certainly thousands of years prior to that.
I have a question. There's Chinese astrology, Indian astrology, and Western astrology, and why are they all different?
Indian astrology is not that different from Western astrology, except in some minor ways. Chinese astrology is very different. So Chinese astrology grew up separately. It grew up in a separate culture. China was pretty much cut off from the rest of the world for a very long time. Indian astrology is actually derivative of Babylonian and Near Eastern astrology, as is, Egyptian, and Western astrology that we practice today is a form of Hellenistic astrology, which the Greeks came in and absorbed the knowledge of the Chaldeans, the Near Eastern Mesopotamian astrologers, and the Egyptian astrologers, and they combined them into a sort of unique system. So Indian astrology is similar, and it uses the same signs of the zodiac. There are a few things that are different, and Indian astrology follows what we would call the sidereal zodiac. And that is, it moves with the movement of the constellations. Western astrology follows what is called the tropical zodiac, which means that the first day of spring is equivalent to the first day of Aries, the first day of summer is equivalent to the first day of Cancer, the first day of fall is equivalent to the first day of Libra, first day of winter is equivalent to the first day of Capricorn, and everything is evenly divided between them.
So that's a solar?
It is solar based, yes. So the sun passing over the equator marks the equinoxes, both spring and fall. And the sun at its extremes, when it hangs over the Tropic of Cancer or the Tropic of Capricorn, marks the solstices.
Okay.
So that's probably the biggest difference. Welcome everyone. This is second class, which is actually the 5th class in this series. Just to make life confusing, we are skipping from Aries, which we did last week. Taurus, Gemini, and Cancer are online. And we're starting with Leo tonight. So we're going to be looking at the 3 Decanates of Leo. I like to start with a quote, and so tonight we've got Carl Gustav Jung, who says, "At the moment, I am looking into astrology, which seems indispensable for a proper understanding of mythology. There are strange and wondrous things in these lands of darkness. Please don't worry about my wanderings in these infinitudes. I shall return laden with rich booty for our knowledge of the human psyche. This is deep stuff. We're working with mythology and with archetypes in this class. And what I like to do in this class is match up those archetypes with contemporary people we know, or more modern historic figures. Some of them are further back in time. We've looked at a few people who are deceased, but mostly we're looking at our contemporaries and seeing how these mythologies shape. Did you get a handout, Laura? Yes, you do. Excellent. How these mythologies shape certain facets of character and self-expression. So when we talk about Leo, we know that Leo belongs to the element of fire. And fire signs we know to be enthusiastic. They are energetic. They are spiritually minded. I always call the fire signs enthusiasm junkies. The other fire signs being Aries and Sagittarius. And why is that? Because those three signs, Aries, Leo, Sagittarius, always want something to be excited about. They always want to be sharing their philosophies, their ideas, their great joys or latest discoveries with other people. Now, Leo is also a fixed quality, which places it in association with the other fixed signs, being, in addition to Leo, are Taurus, Scorpio, and Aquarius. And one of the things we know about the fixed signs is that they are perfectors, which means at times they can be rigid and unyielding, but they are also each of those elements in its most perfect form. Now, keyword for the sign of Leo is I will. So that implies that Leos all move from their own volition, from their own desires, and from what it is that they want to do or accomplish in this world. So each of the three decanates of Leo, we're going to look at them from how the will is applied. Each of the Leo decanates has the influence of the sun, but they also have the sub-influence of each of the signs, which co-rule them. So the first decanate of Leo, which is the constellation Crater, is the Leo-Leo decanate, ruled by the sun. The second decanate, Centaurus, the centaur in the heavens, is the Sagittarius decanate, governed by Jupiter. And the third decanate, Corvus, the crow, is the Aries decanate, governed by Mars. Now, as I mentioned in last week's class, that there are two ways which we imply our interpretations of the decanates. This is one. We look at the sub-influence of the other fire signs and their ruling planet and how that shapes the character, temperament, self-expression of this sub-influence of the sign of Leo. But we also look at the specific stories of mythology, and we pull very rich imagery from that. That becomes the spiritual text and to some degree the keyword which is associated with each of these constellations, each of these stories. So, the first decanate of Leo, and this image comes from the Leiden Aratia, 12th century manuscript. Excuse me. This is the first decanate, which means any planets that fall within 0 degrees of Leo to 9 degrees. 9 degrees, actually, and 59 minutes of Leo belong to this first decanate. The solar dates, and what this means is the 10 days out of the year where the sun is passing through this particular sub-influence of Leo, is July 23rd to August 3rd. Now, this is pictured in the heavens as a fiery, furnace, inverted, so that the fire it contains pours out upon the earth. And the key word associated with this, we can see, comes from the sub-influence of the sun being the Leo decadent. The key word is rulership, which implies a sense of authority, a sense of control, a sense of dominion. And the spiritual text, which is associated with this, is to learn to like anything, associate with it as many pleasurable thoughts and sensations as possible. So what we're going to do tonight is explore the constellation itself. We're going to explore the mythology associated with this. We'll look at the spiritual insights that are given to us by C.C. Zhang, the author of the Brotherhood of Light Lessons. And then I have chosen for this decanate a chart of someone most of us may recognize that in some ways really expresses the attitude of this particular mythology. All right. What is crater? If you look here, this is the constellation of Hydra, which is actually one of the longest constellations in the heavens. Hydra stretches through 4 zodiacal signs, from the sign of Cancer, through Leo, through Virgo, and on to touching upon Libra, which those 4 signs we know in a natural chart correspond to what are called the houses of companionship. 4th house, home and family. 5th house, which is love, romance, children. 6th house, colleagues and co-workers. 7th house, marriage and partnerships. So, here we have sort of a myriad of constellations on the back of Hydra, of which 2 of them are very strongly interrelated. And those of you that were participating in the class on Cancer, or may have gone and watched the online courses, there is a story told that includes both the water serpent, the crater, which is a drinking vessel, and the crow, which is the bird of Apollo. All of these are found on the back of Hydra, the water serpent. Okay, what is a crater or crater? It's basically a very big wine vessel. What the Greeks used to do, they didn't drink their wine straight up. Basically, they mixed wine with water. And there's a reason for that. Back in those days, there were not always good water sources. You know, water, as we know today, if you go out hiking or camping in the hills around here, especially if you go through areas where livestock is grazed, you run the risk of getting amoebas in your water. So, by mixing wine, which had alcohol in it, in with water, it would dilute the wine, give one something to drink, and it would also, in a sense, purify the water. So they had these big vessels that they would mix that in. But not only wine, water would be contained in craters as well. So, this particular wine vessel is considered to be the wine cup of Apollo. And there's a story about how he took that wine cup and he asked his crow. Apollo was ready to do a ritual ablution. He was ready to make a sacrifice. And to make that sacrifice, he needed to have pure spring water. Each of the gods has their own bird. The eagle is the bird of Jupiter, the dove of Venus, and the crow is the bird sacred to Apollo. So what he did is he said, here, take my cup. I want you to go to the spring and basically, would you fill this up and bring this water back for my ritual? Well, there's Apollo holding his lyre, and I believe he's pouring out his wine cup there, and there's his crow. This is from an old Greek pottery painting. What happened? As the crow gets towards the spring, he actually discovers a fig tree. And on this fig tree is fruit, and lots of it, but it's not quite ripe. And you probably all know about birds and ripe fruit. I used to have cherry trees. And I would go out and watch my cherry trees to see when the fruit was ripening. And I could tell when it was just about to get ripe. And the next day I'd go out there to pick it. The birds had all come first and taken one bite out of each cherry. So, what happens? This crow is hanging around. He decides, oh, this is just too tempting. I can't rush back with the water when, within just a couple of days, these figs are going to be so very good. So he waited for it to become ripe, sat around and gorged himself, and then he remembered his errand he was on, that he had to go and collect the water from the spring. And while collecting the water, he plucked a little water snake up and dropped it into the cup so he could have an excuse to take with him back to Apollo. So, he claimed that this little snake, drinking daily from the spring, would dry the spring up and prevented him from coming back. Well, I think, Apollo was smart, and he was the god of divination and sort of knew everything. So, that, or he probably saw, fig seeds on the bird's beak or something, and decided that he was lying, that he really had done a misdeed. He had dishonored him. He had prevented him from being able to follow through with his rituals. And so he placed him in the heavens on the back of the serpent. And ever so close to the cup, but is there an issue? Yes.
When you put your chin down, you rub the mic.
Ah.
And it's making noise, so we should figure it out.
Okay. I'm going to put the mic down so I can still put my chin down.
There you go. I just realized what Mr. Paul say, well, I hear it, now I don't hear it. Now I hear it, now I don't hear it.
Oh boy. Now I broke it. And now it's dropped. Thank you for your patience.
Sorry about the interruption.
No, thank you for letting us know. Hopefully I'll have the wherewithal to remember this next week, so I don't repeat the same. So there you have it, that constellation of this lengthy water serpent. There's the drinking cup on its back filled with spring water, and there is the crow on the back, but he's placed in a position where he can never reach the cup, and that was his punishment. Yeah. Didn't do that again. Alrighty. Now, curiously though, in some star charts, the image is of a crater only filled with braziers, basically. It's basically filled with burning coals, which seems fitting for the first decanate of Leo, which is a fire sign and not a water sign. Now, certain Christian authors determined that this was the brazier that poured fire and brimstone down upon the earth. And so in sort of apocalyptic astrology, there are myths about the earth being inundated by either earthquakes or by floods or by fire from heaven. I would suppose the other one would be windstorms. I'm not sure if I've heard of that mythology. But they associate it with the precession of the equinoxes when it moves backwards from a fixed sign into a movable sign, that these are the great cataclysmic times. So the legends which surround this are that the movement of the equinoctial pole year backwards from Leo into Cancer is when the inundation by fire takes place. And if I could do my math, I'd figure it out and tell you, but can't do that in my head. So this was among the original 48 constellations that were recognized by Ptolemy, the 2nd century astrologer. And it's really a faint constellation. There are no stars in this constellation that are brighter than 3rd magnitude. And as I mentioned, very few, but some of the star charts actually show the fiery furnace. Others really just show the drinking vessel. So, coming from delineating the horoscope, I'm going to read a long quote. The first decanate of Leo is pictured among the constellations by crater, a furnace, or cup of fire. In this manner did the ancient masters of starry lore portray the fiery love nature of those born under this section of the sky. Their most notable trait is the desire and ability to rule others. And unless this tendency is restrained, there is an inclination to dominate. Yet always there is a powerful love nature, and as love is at the foundation of all achievement, if this love energy can be directed into proper channels, it leads on to success. But due to its strength, there is danger turning to one extreme or the other, either permitting pleasure to dominate the life, or in rebellion at the tendency towards excess to become the avowed aesthetic. As neither extreme permits of proper expression the fine qualities of this decanate, the watchword should be moderation. That comes from delineating the horoscope. Now, he goes on to say, through following the methods indicated by an understanding of this principle, it is possible to cultivate a distinct liking for almost anything. There are always many phases of a thing, for which, if sought for, can make it appear in a pleasurable light. Even the thought of the advantage of having a willpower strong enough to continue what otherwise is a distinctly unpleasant activity may, and often does, so strongly associate the activity with thoughts of satisfaction that the activity in time becomes a pleasure. In fact, it is only through the advantages that are associated with it that people commonly learn to take pleasure in hard work. People born while the sun is in this first decade of Leo commonly have a desire for and some ability in rulership. The text derived from Prater is, to learn to like anything, associated with it as many pleasurable thoughts and sensations as possible. So, and that's from Spiritual Astrology. All right, I think of rulership. It isn't just about leading or dominating others, but rulership is also, much as he describes there, it's about gaining a skill, a really distinct skill or ability from doing something. So of all the different charts I looked at, and I look usually at a good dozen charts before selecting one, I decided to go with Dorothy Hamill. And most of us in this room are old enough to basically remember her from the, 76 Winter Olympics. Does everyone remember who Dorothy Hamill is? They always commented on her hair. So, from the time she was a young girl, American champion figure skater Dorothy Hamill wanted to skate. Hamill was given her first pair of ice skates as a Christmas present at age 8. She was painfully shy as a child and gained self-confidence as her dedication and discipline to the skating evolved. At age 14, she dropped out of school and received private tutoring while working on her skating routine and jumps. She followed her skating coach to Denver, Colorado, and practiced several hours a day for 6 days a week for 11 months. Does that sound dedicated? Her hard work and dedication paid off, for she won the U.S. titles in 1974, 75, and an Olympic gold medal in 1976 at the Winter Olympics in Innsbruck, Austria. Hamill capitalized on her Olympic fame by appearing in television commercials and traveling with the Ice Capades, eventually becoming the successor to ice skating queen Peggy Fleming. Equal to her reputation as a skater was her, as Laura said, hairdo. And she appeared in shampoo commercials. Hamill met Dean Paul Martin, the son of actor and nightclub entertainer Dean Martin, in 1979. They married in 82 and divorced in 84 without children. In 1987, Hamill married Kenneth Forsyth, 48, a sports medicine doctor. The couple gave birth to their daughter, Alexandra, after a difficult pregnancy and delivery in 1989. And in 1993, she and Forsyth bought the Ice Capades. In 95, they separated after 8 years of marriage. On December 18, 1994, Hamill announced her retirement from pro figure skating, and she and Forsyth sold the Ice Capades to International Family Entertainment, Inc. in February 1995. In early January 2008, Hamill revealed that she had been diagnosed with breast cancer and would drop out of her skating tour with Broadway on Ice while she received treatment at Johns Hopkins. So, here is the quote that I thought was so appropriate to the spiritual decanate of Crater. She said, "I don't really think they saw anything in me, except the fact that I was interested in it. Some of the kids would miss a week here and miss a week there. I think they could see that I really enjoyed it." So, the concept here, again, to learn to like anything, associate with it as many pleasurable thoughts and sensations as possible. Practicing for skating or any other sport, or playing the piano, or any other thing that requires skill, oftentimes requires almost a point of endurance after it's, for most people, no longer fun. And so you can see here, this really takes the temperament, the personality required. Now let's look at her chart, see if we pick out anything interesting here. Curiously enough, the sun in this chart is in the 6th house, which has to do with work and labor. So this rulership that she has as part of her temperament or part of her character is very much carried out through the expression of her work and through her, basically her repeated trials and efforts.
And that's also Mercury in the house of work and labor. So she thought about this a lot. It was always on her mind.
Yes, always on her mind. And to be an athlete, if you think about it, you also have to have stamina. You need to have physical energy and strength. And although figure skaters make it look so easy until they trip and fall down on the ice, when it then looks really hard. But look at the 1st house of the chart. Here we have in Pisces. And Pisces really is dance. So, ice capades. Basically, it's dancing on ice. We have the moon and Mars within 2 degrees of one another in the 1st house of her chart, which governs physical stamina and physical ability. So this is it's a really good chart for an athlete. It's a great chart for a dancer. And it's a great chart for someone who could really apply herself with determination to her work, but associate enough pleasure with it that she could really keep at it and be enormously successful. I think also one of the advantages with her chart for associating pleasure is Venus is the dominant planet. The ascendant is strongest in her chart, which is physical body, health, appearance. And again, when people talk about Dorothy Hamill, quite often they will mention her hair before they mention her figure skating, because this is a outstanding physical characteristic of hers. It's something she capitalized on, which is the ascendant. But Venus is the planet of pleasure, and in her chart, it's angular, in the 4th house, receives a lot of energy, and I think that's part of the reason why it became so easy for her to figure out a way to enjoy whatever she's doing. Because basically, what do Venus people want to have?
Affection.
Yes, pleasure, affection, and a good time. All right. The 2nd decanate of Leo, the Decanate of Centaurus, or the Centaur, is the Sagittarius Decanate of Leo. Well, that doesn't take a huge stretch of the imagination. And this is any planets that fall within 10 degrees to 19 degrees and 59 minutes of Leo are associated with this decan and this mythology. Now, the sun is here from August 3rd to 13th during those 10 days. The symbols for this, when we read them, are Leo, Sagittarius, and Jupiter is the influence. So we think of Sagittarius and Jupiter as being very benevolent influences. They bring a certain element of joy, of generosity, of goodwill, faith, or religiosity to whatever they do. And like the sign of Sagittarius, Centaurus is one of two centaurs in the heavens. The difference is Sagittarius literally means the archer. So Sagittarius holds a bow and arrow, whereas Centaurus is pictured as a creature with the body of the horse and the torso of a man, armed with a spear, upon the point of which is impaled a wolf. And the key word for this constellation is reformation. Now, I can remember as children, we were frequently told that we were going to be sent to reform school, which never sounded like anything good to us children. But something that is reformed, it is reformed or reshaped or made into something better. So a reformation we think of as an improvement of some type. You know, the greatest Reformation we think about is the Protestant Reformation, which was aimed at reforming the Christian church, you know, after the abuses of clergy and the papacy. But there are many other types of reformations. And the spiritual text which Zane associates with this middle decanate of Leo is, "It is more blessed to give than to receive, and to receive in full measure, we must first give of that which we already have." So, giving is definitely a Jupiter trait. Jupiter is the planet of charitability, and this sign of Leo, with the sub-influence of Sagittarius and Jupiter, tends towards philanthropy, giving, and generosity. All right. Centaurus is one of the largest and brightest constellations in the southern sky. The brightest star, Alpha Centauri, is also known as Rigel, and is a binary star system whose combined magnitude rated as the third brightest star in the sky. Along with Sagittarius, the constellation is Centaurus, is one of two centaurs pictured in the heavens. Now, these mythic creatures, comprised of the body of a horse and the torso of a man, were central to the folklore of the ancient Greeks. As liminal beings caught between two natures, centaurs had a reputation much like English soccer fans. When they showed up on the mythological scene, it was pretty much guaranteed that all hell would break loose. Among these debauched party animals, there was one exceptional soul by the name of Chiron. Pictured here. Intelligent and civilized, he had amassed the most profound knowledge of astrology, healing, and medicine. He was renowned for such famous protégés as Jason, Asclepius, Achilles, Theseus, and Heracles. Unlike the other uncultured delinquents who were his brethren, Chiron was a noble soul, and his story is one of the making the ultimate sacrifice. Now, as the legend goes, Prometheus, as seen in this illustration, who for the benefit of mankind had stolen fire from the gods, he had been punished by Zeus, and you can see his punishment here. He was basically chained to a rock, and every day an eagle came to eat of his liver. How does that sound for torture? Now, as the centaur Chiron lay dying, all of these constellations are tied into one another, their stories. And this is a constellation that we talked about earlier, and one which we will talk about next week when we talk about Hercules. But Hercules slew the Hydra, which was so venomous that he dipped arrows in the blood. And he, accidentally shot Chiron. Now, Chiron was immortal, being the son of Zeus, who I believe mated with Nephele, the cloud goddess, to produce Chiron. So, he couldn't die, but if you think of it, he'd been shot with a poisoned arrow, which meant he was in torture and agony all the time. So here, and it is somewhat ironic that the chief master of healing was unable to heal himself. So what he did is he bestowed his immortality to Prometheus. So this is a story about basically philanthropy, giving the greatest gift to mankind. And that is one of the qualities that is so strong in the nature of the natives that are born in this time period. Now in this course, we've only been looking at sun signs. Because it's so easy to measure what decanate the sun falls in, just by having the solar dates that I've given you. One can have their moon, Mercury, their ascendant in any of these decanates, and these stories become also a part of your mythology. And last year we did a wonderful workshop with Vega, where we chose the decanates governed by the sun, moon, and ascendant, and basically drew up a story about ourselves that combined those three mythologies. It was remarkably insightful. All right, on to a quote from Delineating the Horoscope. In the second, or Jupiter decanate of Leo, the inherent quality of dominant control, characteristic of Leo, is modified by the sub-influence of the sign of the higher mind, Sagittarius. The philosophical and religious elements are more in evidence, and those born here readily recognize the prevalent weaknesses both in current politics and in current religion. And what is more important, they have the courage of their convictions and the power to gain followers for their own progressive ideas. He went on to say, to picture the ruthless onslaughts with which these people attack both persons and policies that seek to ravage society, Centaurus, a being having the lower parts of a horse and the upper parts of a man, is represented among the constellations as impaling on the end of his spear the wolf that pictures the last decanate of Libra. This wolf symbolizes those who use the brilliancy of their intellects to suppress truth and to foist ignorance and superstition upon society that they may profit by its exploitation. And those born in this middle decanate of Leo have the power to convince and lead others. It behooves them to put forth every effort to gain the truth and to take great care that they do not disseminate erroneous notions. And then lastly, from spiritual astrology. Such a life of spiritual endeavor as Santa Claus and Centaurus clearly teach is dependent upon what is done for others. It is the effort to give rather than the effort to take, which promises a spiritual harvest. After all, in the realms of the future, after we shall have passed from this mundane sphere, the physical objects men set their hearts upon will have less value than the tinsel and in 1971, 1 year after enrolling. He went on to finish his education in 1996. In February 1981, Wozniak was injured in a private plane crash. Wozniak has been married 3 times. His first marriage was brief with no children. His second marriage, he had 3 kids. In 1990, he married lawyer Suzanne Mulkern, whom he had known in the 7th grade. The couple shares 6 children, altogether aged 5 to 18, 3 from his previous marriage and 3 from her previous marriage. Wozniak's autobiography, I Was, From Computer Geek to Cult Icon, How I Invented the Personal Computer, Co-Founded Apple, and Had Fun Doing It, was published in 2006. That's a long title. What if they fit all of that on the spine of the book?
We had some technical problems. You have a request if you can repeat the last 2 or 3 minutes of what you said when you get all done. Can you come back to this?
Sure. Wozniak is active as a philanthropist. Since leaving Apple, has provided all the money as well as on-site technical support for the technology program in his local school district. UNUSON, Unite Us in Song, is an organization Wozniak formed to organize the 2 U.S. festivals, is now primarily tasked with supporting his educational and philanthropic projects. In 1986, Wozniak lent his name to the Stephen G. Wozniak Achievement Awards, referred to as Wozie Awards, which he presented to 6 Bay Area high schools and college students for their innovative use of computers in the fields of business, art, and music. So, let's take a look. Interestingly enough, yes, Barbara?
Alice Marie said it was right after Chiron that gave his powers to one of the other gods. So there was a piece right in there. So if you can just earmark that and come back later.
Okay. Yes, remind me at the end. Here we have it, the Sun in Centaurus in the 11th house. Groups, clubs, organizations. So it seems fitting that his philanthropy actually went towards creating these different technology festivals, founding actual groups, and working with organizations. What about his schooling? Curiously, Mercury and Saturn conjunct in Virgo in the 12th house. My guess is that there is a side to him that likes to work quietly alone in the garage, designing and developing. This is the area of research and development. Yet with Mercury conjuncting Saturn, there could also be feelings that, a school is a duty or a responsibility, or that one's actually being held back from what they really want to be doing. Nevertheless, in terms of a career chart, look at that. This is a dominant 10th house in this chart. The 10th house has to do with one's career, honor, reputation, status, and recognition. And this is definitely somebody who has a name which, with Uranus up there, is certainly known in the realm of computers and technology. Not every person will be familiar with him. So this chart has a dominant midheaven, the point directly overhead at the time of birth, career, honor, reputation. The next in power is Uranus, which governs computers, labor-saving devices, electronics, and the like. So we can see some of the mythological imprints that have actually molded this man and his character and the directions that he's headed in life. All right. Let me see. What we'll do before we go too far, I'm going to backtrack for those online, because it'll be easier to go back now than... I can actually hear the cell phone from 20 paces.
I'm not deaf yet.
All right, I think this is where things got cut off before, so I'll go back and repeat. This is also in everyone's notes. So, as the legend goes, Prometheus, who for the benefit of mankind had stolen fire from the gods, had been punished by Zeus. His eternal penalty for his humanitarian efforts was to be chained to a rock in the Caucasus and have his liver eaten daily by an eagle. Ooh. The centaur Chiron lay dying after having been shot in the thigh by an arrow dipped in the blood of Hydra. Ironically, the master of the healing arts could not heal himself. Willingly, he gave of himself and gave his greatest gift, immortality, to Prometheus, the savior of mankind.
Correct, okay.
These are also in your handouts. In the second or Jupiter Decanate of Leo, the inherent quality of dominant control characteristic of Leo is modified by the sub-influence of the sign of the higher mind, Sagittarius. The philosophical and religious elements are more in evidence, and those born here readily recognize the prevalent weaknesses both in current politics and in current religion. And what is more important, they have the courage of their convictions and the power to gain followers for their own progressive ideas. In the same book, to picture the ruthless onslaughts with which these people attack both persons and policies that seek to ravage society, Centaurus, a being having the lower parts of a horse and the upper parts of a man, is represented among the constellations as impaling on the end of his spear the wolf that pictures the last decanate of Libra. This wolf symbolizes those who use the brilliancy of their intellects to suppress truth and to foist ignorance and superstition upon society, that they may profit by its exploitation. As those born in this middle decade of Leo have the power to convince and lead others, it behooves them to put forth every effort to gain the truth and to take great care that they do not disseminate erroneous notions. Such a life of spiritual endeavor as Santa Claus and Centaurus clearly teach is dependent upon what is done for others. It is the effort to give rather than the effort to take, which promises a spiritual harvest. After all, in the realms of the future, after we shall have passed from this mundane sphere, the physical objects men set their hearts upon will have less value than the tinsel and gilded baubles with which they decorate the Christmas tree. Those born while the sun is in the Reformation Decanate of Leo are often more energetic to bring beneficial changes. The text is, "It is more blessed to give than to receive, and to receive in full measure we must first give of that which we already have." I think I was reading something recently, I think it was People magazine, which in its list of, I don't know, great events in 2011 or something like that, really talked about Apple as being one of those things that we will look back on as being the transformative technology of the era. The things that the two Steves actually developed and came up with, even though I still refuse to get an iPhone, doesn't mean that the rest of the world has not been reformed somehow by them. All right, let's move through. Oh, did we do his quote? No. Here, think Centaurus. Some great people are leaders and others are more lucky. In the right place at the right time. I'd put myself in the latter category. That's a Sagittarius Jupiter influence. All right. Corvus the Crow. Have we seen this before? Yes, just 2 decanates ago when we did Crater. Here he is on the back of Hydra at a distance from the cool spring water or the burning embers, whichever you believe are contained in this drinking cup. This is the 3rd decade of Leo, which is when the sun is between 20 to 29 degrees. The solar dates for that will be August 13th to 23rd. And the symbols associated with this is the Aries Decade of Leo, Aries, Leo, ruled by Mars. So we can see that there's a lot of dynamic energy. Mars always tends to bring a certain degree of strife with it. And we certainly will see that in this story. We've already discussed one story of Corvus, which was his being sent to collect water. Well, we'll talk about another. But the word Corvus literally is Latin for crow. Any of you who have drunk Jose Cuervo tequila in your past will see that it too is crow, which comes from the Latin. The description is that this is a raven with wings outspread, making a noisy meal from the back of the water serpent. Well, both ravens and crows were sacred to Apollo. We know that there's actually a difference between these birds, both in shape, size, beaks, etc., wingspan, but they're kind of lumped in together as blackbirds. The text for this is very important. The key word is ambition, And I always think of ambition. Ambition oftentimes has a selfish element to it. Because in most ambitions, there is the desire for personal gain or personal goal. It's not always selfish, because sometimes people have ambitions, which may include the community or groups or others or something philanthropic. But nevertheless, ambition usually implies that somebody's, climbing on the back of others to try and elevate themselves in some way. Not that all persons born under this decanate do that. So there's different ways we can look at ambition. The text is that man tends to become that which he most talks about and most thinks about. Now, we've already talked about this, how they're pictured together on the back of the water serpent. And we've talked about one story. In terms of the constellation itself, it's not a very bright constellation. It has 11 visible stars. One of them is pretty much under third magnitude. Now, another story about the crow, which really applies very much to this particular decanate. Legend holds that crows were once beautiful. I mean, they're still beautiful, but they were once considered more beautiful, to be snowy white, and that they were able to speak the language of humans. Now, you would have thunk that Apollo learned his lesson. How he got this bird as his mascot is beyond me, and why he kept sending it off to do different tasks. But he sent the bird off to spy. And he sent him off to spy on his lover, Coronis, who just so happened to be with Apollo's child. Well, as happened in the affairs of humans, both ancient and modern, she became attracted to a mere mortal. And what happened? The crow went back and talked, or squawked. He reported her infidelities back to Apollo. Well, what do you think happened? It's the old shoot the messenger. He tells him to go spy, but he goes and spies and comes back and talks about it. So in a rage, Apollo turned him black and took away his abilities to speak. So all we hear the crow doing now is that, "Krah, krah, krah." He's trying to speak, but it no longer makes any sense. Well, what else happened? These Greek gods were like mafia families. Yeah, you piss one off, and what happens? The entire crew gets involved. So, Apollo just happened to have a twin sister who took up his cause. This was Artemis. And what did she do? She was always running around with a bow and arrow. And she went and shot the infidel Coronis. But, she was pregnant. And Apollo could not allow his unborn son to just die. So, basically, the child was rescued. And this child grew up to be Asclepius, who we'll talk about in a couple of weeks when we discuss the constellation of Ophiuchus. And Asclepius went on to become the great god of healing and a student of Chiron, or Centaurus. So Zane says, in delineating the horoscope, Corvus the raven is the constellation picturing the tendencies of people born under the third decanate of Leo. This raven is pictured with wings outspread, as if in readiness to fly aloft, but with its feet firmly gripping the back of Hydra, the water serpent. This symbolizes the emotions that are associated with creative energy, for the raven appears to be making a meal from the flesh of the serpent. In this last portion of Leo, we have the love of power and rulership combined with the quality of leadership bestowed by an Aries. As the consequence, those born under this section of the sky are determined to rise in life regardless of obstacles. And when this tendency is carried to extremes, they will sacrifice their associates, their family, and even integrity itself in order to increase their power. But when their ideals are thoroughly for the welfare of humanity, rather than for more personal aggrandizement, they become of immense service to society through their natural gift of being able to handle others and use them to advantage. To the extent an individual talks about and thinks about that which is rotten, is this an expression of rottenness within himself? Those who are clean have a desire to keep away from filth. They do not revel in the sinfulness of others. Furthermore, just as the clerk who identifies himself with the hero cultivates within himself a delight in valiant and honorable action, and just as the shopgirl, this is sounding very dated, who identifies herself with the sweet and admirable heroine, cultivates within herself pleasure and womanly conduct of the same high standard, so does the scandal-monger cultivate within himself an increasing relish for moral carry-on. What is carry-on? Is it your luggage you take on the plane? No. Dead animals. Where do we see crows around here in New Mexico? You know, driving up Highway 4, where there's roadkill, you will see the carry-on seeking crows. And in trees, in pecan trees. Yes, they will go and pick pecans, drop them to the sidewalk, collect the nuts, but basically they like to sit in trees above your car and defecate. That is, and especially if it's a black car, that is even more preferred. So, all right. So he's using the symbolism of the crow as a carry-on bird that eats fetid flesh. As the tendency in humans, we like to talk about things. And as indicated, this serpent stretches through the house of companionship. That the back that he's pulling the flesh out of goes from Cancer, home and family. Leo, love affairs. 6th house, co-workers. 7th house, marriage. So what do people like to gossip about?
Other people.
Other people and their relationships. You know, it's always the topic for newspapers and news segments. He goes on to say that repressed desires, even though unrecognized objectively, cannot be kept from finding some expression for their energy. And as the raven became black because he carried a black story, so that which is thought about adds its thought images to the soul. The text thus follows: a man tends to become that which he most talks about and most thinks about. That's from Spiritual Astrology. I chose someone who has been on air recently and who I marvel at, but is also a very controversial figure, both for herself and both for what people like to talk about. So this is Madonna Louise Ciccone. And birth data, August 16th, 1958, 7:05 a.m., Bay City, Michigan, and there's the coordinates. I'm going to go to her quote first because it's just so her. I'm tough, I'm ambitious. Have you heard that word before? And I know exactly what I want. If that makes me a bitch, okay. So, what do we know about her? People really like to talk about her, and she likes to do things that might be very provocative or scandalous. The most recent report I heard, and I'm paraphrasing this, was very unkind. Did anyone watch the Super Bowl? Mm-hmm. Well, I watched the 10 minutes for the half show because I wanted to see Madonna. So I went to a party where the rest of the time I could see my friends. And one of the critics of this said something to the extent of, well, there you have a 50-year-old woman singing a 20-year-old song. People like to talk about her. And again, like the crow, it's not always so kindly.
That's because she's so unique, and most people are so common.
Well put. All right. Let's talk about Madonna. She's an American singer, songwriter, actress, and entrepreneur who has been praised for her diverse musical productions, and at the same time, she has served as a lightning rod for controversy. Born Madonna Louise Veronica Ciccone, Madonna was raised in a large Italian-American family. Her engineer dad, Silvio Anthony Ciccone, was a devout Catholic. At 6, her mother, Madonna Louise Fortun, died from cancer, leaving her and 6 siblings to be raised by their father, and eventually a stepmother. From the time she was 10, Madonna was attracting attention to herself. Imagine that. By the 9th grade, she started attending dance school, where she was introduced to the world of art, theater, gay clubs, and dance bars. In 1997, at age 17, and with $35 in her pocket, Madonna moved to New York to pursue a career in modern dance. While dancing with the Pearl Lang Company, she worked odd jobs and lived in a rundown apartment. In the fall of 1978, she was sexually assaulted at knife point. Her career was meteoric. Her hit album, Madonna, had made her a household name, and 1984's Like a Virgin made her a superstar. All 13 of her singles were top 10 hits. Madonna has sold more than 300 million records worldwide. Her first 2 films had poor reviews and made little impact, Desperately Seeking Susan and Shanghai Surprise. However, she's received a Golden Globe nomination for her role in Evita. Other business ventures include being a fashion designer, children's book author, film director, and producer. With her son in the Corvus Decanate of Leo, her biographers love to feature the details of her love and romantic life. In 1979, she had taken nude pictures for Playboy and Penthouse, which were not released until August 1985. From 1982 to 85, she dated DJ record producer John Jellybean Benitez. Madonna first met Sean Penn in February 1985, and they married in August 1985. A marriage that lasted 27 months, finally ending in December 1987. Her Truth or Dare video was released on May 17, 1991. By mid-1988, she was spending time with Sandra Bernhard, with whom she later confirmed an affair. By 1991, her friend Ingrid Casares was a companion for some years. She began a 3-year affair with bodyguard Jim Albright in February 1991 to January 1994. Madonna met personal trainer Carlos Leon on September 8, 1995, and they had a baby, Lourdes, together. On October 14, 1996, they separated May 1997, remaining on friendly terms. In 2000, Madonna was again pregnant by British director Guy Ritchie. She was rushed to Cedars-Sinai Hospital 3 weeks early when she went into labor. Doctors performed an emergency C-section. Their son, Rocco Ritchie, was born August 11, 2000. They later married in December 2000 at a castle in Scotland. And let's see. They adopted a baby boy from Malawi, and this, because of her celebrity status, brought a lot of attention from different world organizations, feeling like she had bypassed the normal adoption processes. And, we could go on and on. Although Madonna manages to remain in the limelight and attract controversy, she also values her privacy. 4 planets in the 12th house. This is clearly somebody who's on stage and somebody who, when is off stage, wants to be alone. Her homes are hermetically sealed with guards, hidden cameras, and electric eye gate. She has a deep spiritual nature. She's been studying Kabbalah and Jewish mysticism since 1998 and has taken the name of Esther after the Old Testament queen. So, take a look at her chart. 12th house, not only has she said and done things that seem really catty or bitchy or unpleasant. I think there was a recent interview somebody told me about with her and, I'm trying to remember his name. Gloria Vanderbilt's son.
Anderson Cooper.
Thank you. Anderson Cooper, who now has his own daytime TV show, talk show, where she was on his show and was making comments about his personal grooming. And other people continue to make comments about her. As you can see, the biographical material I was able to pull up on her was primarily about her love life. As interesting and varied as it has been. All right. Oops. Here are our next classes, if we can bounce back. No. Next week, Virgo, followed by Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, Pisces, the order you would expect. So, now it's discussion time.
Don't forget you gotta go back to Chiron someplace.
Oh, I did that while you were out of the room talking on the phone.
Thank you.
Anyone have their 2 cents worth they want to put in on any of these constellations? You're all looking pretty sleepy tonight, and I've droned on, so this is your chance. Any questions about the charts, the personalities, Those of you who are online, hopefully, if you've had questions, you've had the time to write them down, and Barb can look at your commentary and see. Yes?
First, I'll apologize for being a newbie.
No apologies needed. We like newbies.
I noticed that Madonna's chart had 5 houses empty, and Steve's and Dorothy Hamill's had 6 houses empty.
This woman's paying attention.
So I wanted to know.
Are you a Virgo?
No, Sag.
Oh, I see.
But 2 Libras. But anyway, why are that, that's almost half in all 3 charts. Why is that such a prevalent thing?
Well, it's a prevalent thing because the planets are all always moving and grouping in different signs of the zodiac. So it's actually not uncommon to see them lined up in certain areas. Just for one example, both Mercury, I believe Mercury can never get more than 28 degrees away from the Sun because of his proximity. And Venus never gets more than 45 degrees away from the Sun. So those 3 planets are almost always going to be grouped within some proximity of one another. During this period of time, Pluto was in Virgo for a very long period of time. I can't give the exact amount of years, but there are certain planets which are very slow moving, being Uranus and especially Neptune and Pluto, which spent about 20 years in each sign. So they're going to be in a particular sign, and charts, the wheel of the chart and the spokes of the chart are determined by the time of birth. So we can see here, she was born shortly after sunrise. This is the line that marks the sun rising, this is noon, and this is sunset. This is midnight. So if we go back, we'll see the time of her birth, 7:05 a.m., just shortly after sunrise. So she's born at a time of year which would place a lot of things in just one area of the chart. Now, when we read a chart, those areas that are congested become very prominent areas. Now, most of us don't know Madonna's private life, except for that which is publicized. But clearly, as astrologers, what we would gather from this is somebody who, although is an extraordinarily public person, also has a powerful personal desires for solitude and privacy. And I always call the 12th house exploring inner space. So my guess is she's somebody who may be very involved in her own therapies, whatever they might be.
She's influenced a lot by secrets and psychic matters, but she's also very, very public.
And the public, of course, comes from the Leo, because how does Leo function?
With will.
And ta-da!
Husband, yeah. But
Yeah.
since she's a lot of those in the 12th house, she's also very secretive, and that could be her personal life. But then still, she's really, and that's exactly how she is. She likes her personal life, but she also, everybody knows her. It's a household name.
Mm-hmm. And household names would imply a dominant moon. So her moon has 13.6% of her power. It's the most powerful planet in her chart. So we can see it right there on the ascendant. The other thing, with that moon and ascendant in Virgo, Mercury and the moon straddle her ascendant. That would imply a strong interest in health. So, this critic who's complaining about a 50-year-old woman doing a 20-year-old song, my goodness, it's amazing what she can do at 50.
Let's see what he can do at 50.
Yeah.
What
critic was that? Why?
It was
find that?
reported to me yesterday, and they didn't say who the critic was or whether, I imagine it was on television.
Huh. I heard a radio, somebody doing a radio show just say that he thought that Madonna did a stellar show, and, that she was out there doing cartwheels on bleachers and, very active and well rehearsed, and I thought she was careful, she was dancing carefully, but she was doing very daring stuff. Cartwheels on bleachers is nothing to
Yeah, with
sneeze
your head
at.
between somebody else's thighs. It's really quite an effort.
She looked great, and it was, it was,
She's probably still
it
sore.
was a show that reminded me of the opening ceremony of the Chinese Olympics. It was really a bedazzling show, beautifully done on, a magnitude of the nth degree kind of thing. Very well conceived, pulled it off, it was lovely.
And I also think, the way it opened with the centurions, the Roman guard pulling in the float, much like Cleopatra, spoke to the bread and circus nature of these ball games. It's so much like the Roman Colosseum. So I thought it was brilliant.
And it ended with kind of all the sparkles in the whole auditorium. Everybody had their candles or their lights, and, it was a starry heavens type of ending that was
That's her
very
mysteries.
beautiful.
And world peace.
Yeah, she
Yeah.
got that in there.
Barb.
You remember so well.
Alice Marie said regarding Chiron, did you equate it with Centaurus? And what about the asteroid Chiron? And Michelle said, Christopher, could you say something about Madonna's Saturn in the 4th house?
Okay.
There's no sign. Oh, no?
Saturn in the 4th house.
There's no Saturn.
This is Steve Wozniak's chart. Suddenly it doesn't look like Madonna anymore. Let me address that first. Saturn is in Sagittarius in the 4th house. And one of the biographers described her father as being, a staunchly Catholic parent. And so this would imply perhaps that there was some rigidity in the home. Clearly, even though the 4th house represents the father and not the mother, it does indicate our childhood. And this might indicate a not so happy childhood, or one where she may have felt religious oppression through family, which might explain some of the, rebelliousness and the sort of anti-clerical stance of some of her later songs and music videos that
Was
we
her
saw in
father
the
around
80s.
for her childhood?
Yes, her mother died, but
Oh.
of cancer, which Saturn also governed. So it's the loss of a family member, perhaps a not so happy childhood. It was a big family, and she probably had to struggle to get noticed among so many siblings. Yes.
And Jan and Portangela said, I'd like to know how Mars is working in the 9th house. I think we're still in Madonna.
Yeah, that would be Madonna. That, I think, is functioning also in part as antagonism towards religion, is one way to see that. It could be the aggressive urges expressing through travel and or marketing. She's probably done a very good job of marketing herself.
Probably.
Yeah. If not, she has really good marketers.
Yeah.
So somebody's working hard in that area. And it could also be the casting off of family religion to explore something else. Back to the other questions that were asked. I want to address those, and then you can talk, Erica.
Oh, no, it's okay.
About Chiron. In Hermetic astrology, we don't use asteroids. We just work with planet signs, houses. And asteroids are a fairly recent inclusion. I do know people, astrologers, that use Chiron and swear by its importance in a chart. I haven't necessarily seen it representing something that can't be explained by another factor in the chart, but the asteroid Chiron is usually looked upon in the chart as the part of an individual's psyche that is what we call the wounded healer. And that's about all I can say about it. But yes, when we spoke about Centaurus, we did correspond that decanate Centaurus to Chiron. And the philanthropy, which is the fact that he exchanged his immortality for Prometheus's life. So, back to your question.
Well, okay, you already had something to do with, do you associate Chiron then with Centaurus?
No, they're two separate things. It's, in a sense, Chiron is pictured in the Zodiac twice, both as Centaurus and as Sagittarius. So there was obviously a great importance among the ancients with this particular mythic creature, and specifically with Chiron as being the civilized centaur. The asteroid Chiron is a more recent discovery that also took on that name. So, but it doesn't really have anything to do with the constellation Centaurus, other than they share the same mythology.
Okay. There are lots of centaurs. But as you said, Chiron was the most evolved and civilized of them. They were a pretty low-life bunch of rabble-rousers otherwise.
Yeah. So no one else made it into the heavens.
So it's history. Yeah.
Yes.
From what I recall of the talk, Centaurus and Sagittarius were kind of the rabble-rouser types, and Chiron was the high-minded one.
Actually, both represent Chiron, but the creatures to which they both belonged, which were called centaurs, have the body of a horse to which was attached the torso of a man, were by, as Laura described it, rabble-rousers. They were by nature party animals that, brought, rape and pillage wherever they went. But Chiron was rare among them in that he was this incredibly evolved being who ended up being the mentor or teacher to all of these other heroes
Atlas,
of Greek.
Hercules, Prometheus,
So
Perseus.
was the Centaurus and Sagittarius, are they possibly different aspects of Chiron's psyche or personality? Or are they just different names for him?
Okay, her questions are, do Centaurus and Sagittarius represent different facets of Chiron's psyche, or do they just represent different names? And I don't know the answer to that, but I'll think about it. I imagine they represent both slightly different parts. One is seen holding bow and arrow, the other a lance. That's the biggest difference between them. But both the sign of Sagittarius, we have to remember Centaurus is the little Sagittarius. It is the section of Leo that is ruled by Sagittarius. So it carries that element of being religious reformers, any type of reformation is governed by that.
Idealists.
Yes.
So, explain, I'm kind of wondering about this. So, the Sagittarius, which is a Centaurus, the Centaurus used to be, or were the troublemakers and stuff. Why is Sagittarius associated with such a high religious thing, and Jupiter?
Because Sagittarius doesn't just represent all the centaurs. It represents Chiron, who was this creature divided. That's why we call it a liminal creature, one that moves between two worlds. The body of the horse represents someone that wants all of the good things of the world, who wants to party and have fun, and we see this in the Sagittarian temperament. They have trouble saying no, and they just basically want to have a good time. Whereas it's divided because it also has the torso of a man, which represents that which is more humane, more lofty, and that because of that, Sagittarians are drawn to the qualities of intellect and philosophy and spirit. So to some degree, just by the mere fact that he is a centaur, he has those qualities of the being, I always say Sagittarians want to live in the world but not be of the world. And it's, again, they want to have all of those worldly delights and pleasures, but never be too attached to them, because the matters of spirit, intellect, philosophy are always what dominate them. So back to let me take her question and then we'll go to the next question. You were asking about distribution of planets, and here again you can just see that at certain times of the year things are bunched up. Again, Venus is never far from the sun, and Mercury can never be far from the sun. So there's always going to be groupings. The other thing to take into account is there are 12 houses, but only 10 planets. So even in the most diverse chart, you will have 2 empty houses. And I have seen charts where there were 7 planets in one house, where the chart is that compacted. Barbara, the other question?
Yes. They keep popping up. Michelle asked, Christopher, could you say something about the Sun-Pluto conjunction in the 11th house in Steve's chart?
Well, I did address it earlier, where I believe this is why his generosity or his reformation or philanthropy expressed through organizing groups. He's organized several philanthropies that are focused around technology groups and science groups. So I don't know anything about his friendships other than the one with Steve Jobs actually went south. They did not have much to say about one another after they parted company. So Pluto and the Sun in Leo, no less, can sometimes bring in this is a fixed sign. So Leos tend to be brittle and unyielding at times. They are, in their ideologies, there are times where they will be very firm and inflexible because of the fixity. We also find that, though, in Aquarius, Scorpio, and Taurus, that fixity. And sometimes what I've noticed with Leos is when they're done with someone, they write them off. There's no flexibility there. Because why? In Leo, the element of pride is always at place. And when one's pride is endangered, all sorts of ills pour out into the world. Yes?
Marie O'Neill asks, is there any relationship between Chiron and Pan?
None that I know of. Pan was a satyr, which is half goat, half man. There is some indication in ancient star charts that Sagittarius might have started off first as a half-goat, half-human creature in Babylonian astrology, but was readily adapted into the centaur by the Greeks. But that's the only thing I know of where Pan and Chiron might have any connection or affiliation. I would have to pore back over mythology to see if they appear in any stories together. Any other questions popping up?
Know that people are loving your Q&A.
Oh, good.
It's funny, but this whole week I was thinking about Dorothy Hamill, and I couldn't figure out why.
Because you were coming here
Talk up a
tonight.
little louder.
I said this whole week I was thinking about Dorothy Hamill, and I couldn't figure out why.
Oh.
Well, you were going to get her to see her soul revealed, and
Because the universe was telling me I was going to be here before I knew about it.
She was a standard bearer for bringing breast cancer to public awareness, was she not?
that's what I've heard.
And with all those planets in the 6th house, you can see that she did, the public a service by being willing to shine light on that area.
Right, because illness, disease, and especially cancer there was a time where one couldn't even say the word breast
Right.
on television. I mean, the Playtex commercials from the late 50s, early 60s certainly talked about lifting and separating, but they didn't talk about what they were lifting and separating. Right. So, the thing of moving out of silence around illness and into conversation is actually the most important thing, because it's only when people get to start sharing ideas that other people's suffering can be more easily alleviated. So, yes, I mean, if we look here, that we could see this 6th house as also having to do with health-related matters and the willingness to discuss or bring that to the world. And,
She's still alive?
yes.
Especially with Uranus conjunct her sun, she could, she could be comfortable as a maverick and a future-thinking person, opening something up in the public eye and stuff, probably. Although I don't think it was probably an easy role for anybody to play. She could probably play it more gracefully than many others might have.
Right, because, the studies that I've read that just in terms of physicality, men are hung up on height and women with breast size. And
I think men are hung up on breast size too.
Well, you're probably right. But in consideration of one's own physiognomy, they judge themselves that way. So to talk about that, and especially in a disease that oftentimes requires the severing or mutilation of breast, to even draw attention to that is hard.
Yeah.
So she was definitely a groundbreaker.
Did she have any children?
I believe so, and I believed I mentioned them, but haven't committed it
Don't worry about it.
to memory.
Just curious.
Children. Couple gave birth to a daughter, Alexandra.
Uh-huh.
Yep, she has one daughter.
And she stayed married for a long time?
I think you slept through that part.
I think so. I'm sorry.
I'll give you my
Bad.
notes.
Oh, that's okay. I'm just,
She married twice.
uh-huh.
One marriage was for
8 years.
2 years, and the other 87 to 95. Yeah, 8 years. So, all right, same time, same place.
So